Well, hello there, everybody. Welcome, Gary Spike Sr., Thomas, Nana, Decker. Yes, Brian Barber. And welcome, everybody, on a Thursday afternoon. Hopefully, everybody's staying warm. So what about you, Lorna Christie? What about you, Justin? Can you hear me? And he froze, ladies and gentlemen. So we'll get him back in the studio. But welcome, everybody. Hopefully everybody's ready, Tammy Johnson, for Christmas. Let's see here. Let's get him out of here. And tonight, we have somebody special. And very nice to have him in the studio, backstage in the green room. Let's go ahead and welcome Mr. Jones. Come on down. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How are you?
Wonderful. Well, Mr. Decker will join us here in a moment. So introduce yourself. Tell us all about you.
Absolutely. I am Barnaby Jones. I am a cryptozoologist and a paranormal researcher. I am the founder and lead investigator for Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society. We are based in Wisconsin and travel all across the United States in search of paranormal, UFOs, and you name it. There's about 15 people on our team. And I'm also the host of Monsters on the Edge podcast on the Untold Radio Network. And I do a lot of stuff.
Interesting. Yeah, sounds like it. How you doing, Mr. Decker? You ready for Christmas?
No. Christmas is going to be a simple affair for me this year, so I guess I'm ready for it.
All right.
I'm ready for it. I switched over to off the Wi-Fi, so hopefully I won't keep dropping out here. I don't know what the problem is tonight. It's always something, ain't it?
It is. Welcome, everybody. Liana, nice to see you. So hopefully everybody's staying warm. So yeah. So where do you want to start at, Jones and Decker? So I'm very intrigued.
Well, I don't know a whole lot about our guest here tonight. I happened to meet him on my travels. As you guys know, I've been kind of traveling around here. I was up in Wisconsin for a month or so. And I was up in my old stomping grounds, old hometown of up in Menominee, Michigan. And a few years ago, they had started their own basically Bigfoot paranormal cryptid con kind of a thing going on. And so I went to the Facebook page for the conference and I messaged them. And I started talking to some random gentleman, and it happened to be this gentleman right here. And then later on, when I went to Lexington, to the Cryptid Con in Lexington, I walked by this table and it said Caps, and I said, that sounds awful familiar. So I kind of went back and forth, and come to find out it was the same gentleman I'd been talking to. So I got to meet him in person in Lexington. So that was kind of a cool thing.
Awesome.
But I don't really know a whole lot about what he does, other than he kind of seems to research everything that we kind of talk about. So I thought he would be a great guest to come on, let us know what's going on up in the North Woods. He currently lives in an area that I used to live, as well as running the Menominee and Marinette Cryptid Con up there. So I'm real excited to have him on, and we'll have a good conversation about all the stuff that he researches and gets into up in the Midwest.
Absolutely. Yeah, I ended up taking over, helping run the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention. It is this year. It's going to be on June 1st in Marinette, Wisconsin. And you guys can find all the information at Wisconsin Caps, spelled out Wisconsin, CAPS.com, and click on the banner there for it. You get links and everything. We are also doing a Bigfoot hike on the property that is associated with the convention as well. So I guess I can talk about that, because that's how the convention started.
Yeah, let's
So
talk about that property up there because I spent a lot of my childhood from the ages of 9 to 17 in this exact area. And a lot of that time spent up there, I was wishing I was in an area that had Bigfoot activity because you just didn't hear about Bigfoot up there at all. And come to find out, almost practically in my backyard, people were experiencing stuff. So let's go ahead and get into that.
absolutely. So we had the opportunity to do a lot of research on an 80-acre private property just outside of Menominee, Michigan. And the property was purchased in 1992 by Craig and Barb Salk. And in 2011, they bought the property as a hunting land. So they have trail cameras all over the property for deer and bear and stuff like that. So they have trail cameras all over the property. And in 2012, I'm sorry, they captured a trail camera picture on one of these, actually three. And the middle trail camera picture contains what some believe is a Bigfoot. And they sent these trail camera pictures, all three of them, into Finding Bigfoot. Finding Bigfoot came out to the property to do an investigation. So that investigation is featured on the Super Youper episode of Finding Bigfoot. And ever since then, people had wanted to see the property, see where the photo was taken. And Craig and Barb opened up the property as kind of a little tourist destination for people to come see the evidence for themselves, see the property, hear all about the stories and stuff that have happened on the property. In 2019, myself and my mom went up there and met Craig and Barb for the first time. And we, in 2020, after we had started Cryptids, Anomalies, and the Paranormal Society, we got the chance to actually spend a weekend out there and investigate. And after that weekend, we became the primary investigators for the property, and we've been up there every year, on and off, almost every weekend since then, doing research. And I got a new book that just came out. It's called Bigfoot is Hiding, and it is all about the 10 years of evidence from the property. So it's 3 books in one. The first book in here is the original book written by Craig Salk that documents the property up until 2017. And then he was working on the second book in here as well, and that has never been published before this. And that documents everything from 2017 to 2021 when he passed away. So I got the opportunity to take his book and finish it up, edit it, get it out there. And then the third part of this book is everything that happened from 2021 up until 2023, this past October. And it chronicles 10 years of research and documentation and experiments on the property with 249 pages of full color, and it's a lot of work in this book right here. So
Awesome. Where do people get a hold of the book?
it is on Amazon. You can get it on Amazon, or if you want a signed paperback copy, you can get that on the website wisconsincaps.com. Bigfoot is Hayden, Hyden. Craig named him Hayden because Bigfoot is always hiding.
Interesting.
So what kind of activity are we having on this property? I mean, are we talking lone individual that was captured on the camera? Are we talking, is there a family group going on? Is this a habituation site? Like, kind of fill us in what's happening up there.
Yeah, absolutely. So we don't really know how many are on the property. I think Craig believed that there was 3 of them that came and went on the property.
Okay.
The very first weekend that we were up there in 2020, it was Memorial Day weekend, and we actually recorded whoops coming from the neighbor's property on 3 occasions over that weekend, at dawn and then at dusk. I'm sorry, at dusk and then dawn and dusk again. So we got them all on recording and stuff. And you can see, well, I should sell this too. We also have on our YouTube channel, Wisconsin Caps. You can find the original 2 episodes of the Hayden Adventure and Bigfoot is Hayden. And then we have an entire mini series called Finding Hayden on our YouTube channel, and that documents every experiment that we do up there. And we're currently releasing season 2 of that as well. But it takes you in depth on different experiments and the audio. We go back and we look at the original trail camera site. We figure out how tall the creature was, and there's so much stuff on there. So
Okay, so he believes he had 3 on there. Go ahead.
yeah, I believe Craig's initial thought was that there was 3 of these different creatures. We've
Okay.
documented 2 different size foot impressions.
Okay.
We've only ever been able to cast 1 footprint, and I believe it's 15 by 10, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
And so that's the one that we've been able to cast. He's also recorded a wet track where they actually found a footprint wet on the ground that was recently left, and they watched it dry up right in front of their eyes. So they got that. We've also documented some other ones that were like impressions in the grass and the dirt,
Mhm.
but not deep enough that you could cast them. So I think we have 2 different size impressions documented, but I think he believed that there was 3 of these individuals.
Okay. Fantastic. Now, for people that aren't familiar with the terrain in that area, tell us a little about the landscape on that property. What types of trees do we have there? Do we have, hollers and ravines? Do we have creeks? And just kind of fill us in on what the terrain is looking like out there.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's kind of hardwood and pines and stuff as well. It's very swampy, marshy in parts where there's parts of the property that you really can't get to unless you put waders on. They call it the island, which is usually underwater. It's kind of ironic because it's the opposite of an island, but it's an island of water, I guess. But and there's several like shooting lanes on the property because, like I said, they were hunters, and a lot of these are washed out as well that you can see down, but they're underwater. But for the most part, the property was mined out for gravel, and so
Okay.
it sits lower than the other properties around it. Now it's actually kind of filled in and grown back up, but there's a big gravel pit in the back, and the neighboring properties. The one property has a bunch of large like retaining ponds on it.
Okay.
There's a lot of water right there. He's actually stocked them with fish. There's a small creek that runs parallel to the property as well on the west side. But beyond it to the back, which would be north and the northeast, it's mostly just woods for quite a ways. So, but it's
Okay. So
80
we're
acres.
yeah, that's a good chunk. We had 80 acres for our camp up in Mead Paper Mill land on the Ford River. I could tell you all a bunch of little towns, and most of y'all wouldn't even absolutely have any idea what I'm talking about, and you're not going to find them on a map. But if I say Mead Paper Mill land, most people from up there know the area that I'm talking about. Outside of Escanaba and all that, we had 80 acres up there, and the property was huge. If you haven't walked in 80 acres, you have no idea just how much there is in 80 acres. We had everything from cedar swamp to marshes. We had big glens. We had big cedar patches. Like we had everything. We had some big hills up there. Just all kinds of stuff up there. So the land in the UP, guys, is very full of life. They're like, you can't go out without seeing squirrels and rabbits and probably chasing up a couple deer, and the birds are going to be everywhere. And you may even walk up on a grouse or two. I mean, the life up there is absolutely amazing. The abundance of wildlife in the woods, and not to mention there's like 500 deer to every square inch of land up there. You know what I mean? So, and the property he's talking about, I mean, good water sources, good food sources, good coverage. Sounds like everything that a squatch or a few squatches would be looking for up there. Have you heard of any other areas that would be considered hotspots, or any other areas that have a fair amount of activity up there in northern Wisconsin or Upper Peninsula?
Well, in the area just around Hayden, I actually received a report of some howls, which would actually be
Okay.
about, I think, 20 minutes northeast of the Hayden property. I can't remember the exact city that it's by, but it's up to the northeast of there. And that was during the time that we've been up there researching as well. So there's definitely a lot of activity up in that area. As far as other locations and stuff as well, we've done a lot of research up in the Rhinelander, Wisconsin area. We had
Okay.
a family group, we believe, 3 of those, which we've documented all 3 foot sizes of these creatures in Rhinelander, Wisconsin. They seem to have moved through over one winter. We can document activity and reports and stuff of them going back to, January, December time. And then around May, they just kind of disappeared, and we haven't heard or seen any evidence of them since then. So it's kind of was like maybe they got disturbed out of a certain area and pushed through. And 20 minutes west of Rhinelander in Harshaw, Wisconsin, we had another report of an individual on a property out there, and the footprint of that creature did not match the same size of any of the 3 that we got in Rhinelander proper. So there was at least 4 individuals in that area during the early months of 2020.
Okay. Yeah. Rhineland, that whole area, again, guys, it's all the big forests of the Midwest up there. There's a lot of also talk of a lot of dogman activity up in those areas as well, different pockets specifically around Rhinelander. And of course, if we're talking about Rhinelander, we got to bring up the Hodag, because you can't talk about Rhinelander without the Hodag. And we actually talked about the Hodag on a previous show, if people recall, how it's a really fun local legend, local lore kind of going on. So I was actually at the Kettle Moraine earlier this year. We had a guest on that came with me, responding to one of the comments there. Kettle Moraine is absolutely gorgeous place. The hard part I have with places like the Kettle Moraine and certain areas is that they're so frequent and visited, and so I think these things would be there, but I think they're going to be more leery of the people and more leery of everybody going around. You know what I mean? But what are your thoughts on that? Like a lot of people like to go into big national parks and walk down the big trails and think they're going to be looking for Bigfoot, right? I personally believe that Bigfoot would be in that area because I know they like to observe and watch humans and human activity. But in those situations, I think they're going to be hyper aware and hyper alert. So I don't think you're really going to get a whole lot, especially as far as, footprints and evidence, unless you're in an area that's going to be much less trafficked or has been closed off for a while. What do you think?
Absolutely. There was a recent sighting down in the Kettle Moraine northern unit. And so not the southern, but the northern area. And we responded to that. And that one the incident was more towards dusk. And the area around there is very, foresty and wooded, not, in the middle of nowhere. So it's possible that these, the creatures are way off in the woods and they come in at dusk to cross through to get to a water source or a food source, because you have all these trails that are easy for hunting. You have well-established trails that animals can follow much easier. And why wouldn't you come in and hunt on those, especially when you have trails that are right in the middle of like below a ridge or something, which in some cases is because the kettles are very up and down. And, so you have this ready-made line of food source that they can come in and hunt. And if you're out there at dusk or just after, or, out night hiking, it's a perfect environment for something to be out there hunting and looking for food. And that's when you're going to run into them. And you're absolutely right. During the day, there's way too many people in some of these areas. There was an area that we have had sighting reports come out of, and we tried to go out there and do a daytime hike. And they were actually having this like off-road biking competition or race or something. And literally there was no place to park at all. They were parked along the road on the edge of the property. So there's definitely a lot of people out there. So.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I know back when I first started as a young teen investigating and researching and stuff, I did come across, I want to say 3 or 4 reports from the Upper Peninsula and one out of Marinette County in Wisconsin there from back in the early 90s and the 80s and stuff. And one of the ones that really stuck out to me was because of where it happened. It was just outside of Watson, Upper Michigan. And what's interesting about that is my dad used to be the preacher at the Watson Bible Church. And this report specifically stated just past Watson, about a half mile, they had an individual just walk across the road in front of them. And that absolutely blew my mind, because I'm like, hey, I know exactly where that is. And I was up there forever, and I never thought about being Bigfoot up there. Um, Another interesting one that comes to mind is just outside of Marquette. It was a winter. A lady was out. I believe she was out trail riding with horses, and during the winter, and she encountered a white one in the woods. That was, I don't want to say it was shadowing her or anything like that, but she noticed it off to the side, about 30 or 40 yards, paralleling her. You know, I don't know if it was necessarily, like I said, following and stalking her. I think it was just probably on that same travel path that she was doing. So there's definitely some reports out of the Upper Peninsula. But you know the people up there, you know how the Yoopers are. They're not talking to outsiders. You're not going to have a group of people coming from California or coming from even Tennessee, Kentucky, coming up there and asking all these questions. You're not going to get anything out of them because the people up there are their own culture, and they don't have a lot of trust for outsiders, and they're not going to sit there and tell you all this stuff. I mean, they might spin you a few good yarns to get a laugh on you. You know what I mean? But you're just not going to get that. And a lot of the people that are out there, they're not your tech people. They're not the ones that are on the computers all the time and are really interested in all the. They're hardworking, down to earth people for the most part, you know. And I think there's a lot of activity that happens up there. And I bet the people that live there, the day to day, the ones that have the properties up there, you know, I'm sure they experience things, quite a bit of things, and just don't talk about it because that's how they are, you know. I mean, that's just how it is. And yeah, Gene, you understand. I know we've got some people that know what I mean, referring to Youper and the culture and stuff, and that's just how it is, you know. So I think if we can get some local people to really do researching up there and to get in there and talk to these guys, I think we would get a lot more information coming out of there, you know, because there's got to be. I mean, the lack of people up there and the amount of massive resources up there, it has to be a phenomenal area, phenomenal ecosystem for these guys.
Absolutely. That was one of the nice things about having the Hayden adventure when Craig was still around, because people would come from all over the area and tell him, you know, because who else do you tell? You know, for the people that want to come out, you know, they're, you know, like you said, they're not going to talk to their, you know, their friends or whatever and their coworkers and stuff. So here's a place that people could come, share their stories, share their experiences, and not be laughed off the property, you know. And that was the amazing thing about the Hayden adventure, because you have all these stories. We have a lot of documentation of people coming on there. Craig kept very good records. He has big maps that were on the property where people could put a pin in, and then he would take notes and stuff and document what they had seen, where they had seen it, and that. But we are actually trying to keep this alive, the Hayden adventure, because now that Craig has passed on, Barb doesn't want to do the property, have the Hayden adventure where people come on the property. So we're doing the Hayden exhibit. And it's going to be a traveling exhibit that I'm going to be taking around to different conventions and events this year, starting with the Marinette Menominee Convention on June 1st. And we have giant banners that have all the information that was on the original tour. So you can see these pictures, this evidence, these documentations. They have QR codes. You can scan the QR code, and it takes you to a YouTube video that is talks. It is Craig actually giving the tour and talking about that display on the property. So you can actually hear Craig tell you about the evidence that was there. We have a little box that you can put headphones on and listen to some of the audio files that we've captured on the property of these creatures. And we have a 2-foot by 4-foot diorama of the property. So you can see in 3D form where everything was captured, what the property looks like, and you get the feel of actually being there. So it's going to be a really cool display when we debut it in June. So
That's awesome. And I think, and the reason I'm spending so much time on this one thing, guys, is because this is the research, the people that need to get out there. This is what needs to get done. Is we need to have local grassroots individuals like yourself and like the Salks that are willing to do this and put this information out there, and not just to make it a big tourist attraction, to make it a big thing, but to pass on information and to let people know that this is out there, this is what's happening. And I think any major breakthroughs that are going to come through in this field are going to come through efforts like this, like private property, like the Salks and like what you're doing. And I think it's a really important, part of the research that is going on that people aren't aware of, because everybody gets caught up in all the big name stuff and all the big name TV shows, or there's people out there that every time they go out in the woods and they're filming something happens, and it's all the cliffhangers, and it's not real solid research, and that's what's important. That's why I really wanted to talk about what was going there on that property and bring it forward to our audience. So let's switch a little bit into the paranormal side. So you also are, I don't want to say ghost hunter because it sounds so weird, but a ghost hunter, cliche, you're a paranormal investigator. And that's another thing, being up there for my late childhood area. I was there from 9 to 17 is the time frame I lived in Menominee. My dad's a Menominee born and bred guy. He was actually born in Menominee Hospital before they tore it down. And my family name is all over that area. The Decker name is known in Menominee, in the Marinette area. I still got family up there, cousins, all that kind of stuff. I never knew there was a lot of paranormal stuff going on up there. I wasn't a big fan of it back then. I was more into cryptid stuff. Every now and then you'd hear about, oh, did you hear this house is a haunted house? Like you hear as a kid. But apparently we have a rich paranormal history up in the area as well. So what's going on with that one?
Absolutely. See, you have followed along with some of my stuff, man.
Oh, maybe a little bit.
Last year, for the Marinette Menominee Bigfoot and Paranormal Convention, my team was asked to do pretty much like a paranormal survey of downtown Menominee, Michigan. And we went around and we talked to all the businesses that were open and would let us in their door. And we asked everyone, hey, have you heard anything happen in this building? Do you know anywhere that's haunted? And we got all this information. We presented it at the convention last year. And January, February, and March, one episode comes out each month on our YouTube channel, Wisconsin Caps. And it is called Spirits of Menominee. And there's 3 episodes, one a month, and each one documents a different location that we went in and got the history, did a whole investigation, and they're really cool. They're a really cool product right now. So
awesome. Yeah, it's a rich history up there, guys. I know a friend of mine was telling me a story that I didn't hear growing up at all about the McDonald brothers.
That's
You're familiar with that. Okay. Now he didn't know of any paranormal aspect to it or any ghosts or anything like that. He had just told me the story, and I thought it was just a great, just kind of a local history story. Can you fill us in on what that was?
Yeah, absolutely. So that would be the Menominee Curse. And when people started talking about that, we're like, all right, well, we got to look into this, because maybe this is why, the whole downtown Menominee is haunted. One of my investigators, Barbara Post, she actually lives right downtown Menominee, and her house is like nothing we've ever investigated. The stuff that's happened there is just bizarre. Not even like normal paranormal, but just bizarre stuff going on there. But the curse. So the McDonald brothers, they were actually cousins, and they came into town and they started causing all these problems. And I want to say they were doing really bad things to people, like rape and stuff like that, if I'm not mistaken, why they actually got in trouble. And they got taken to jail. And the town of Menominee got together and they said, that's not good enough. We want to punish these guys. So they went in, they broke them out of jail. They dragged them literally around the town, beating them up and just very, very brutal graphic stuff that they did to these people. And eventually they got to the town pastor, and he said, "You guys are the worst bunch of hooligans. You're worse than the people that you're beating up, and I curse you all that you're going to die very, early bad deaths or whatever." And each of the people in that group died within a certain amount of time of that curse. So that was the Menominee curse, is this group of, hooligans that went out and, took vigilante justice into their own hands. So that's the Menominee curse.
Yeah, right. And that was through the whole town, right? Like my understanding of it was they were like dragged behind horses,
Yep.
kind of a thing throughout the town. Were they eventually hung? I mean, was it a lynch mob? Did they end up hanging them?
I believe they did get hung at the end, but he didn't die. I think there was something like there's different versions of the story too as to what actually happened. So
Right.
I mean, there's so much. It's very graphic. If you read like some of these things, like the things that they did to them, yeah. So I mean, I don't know how much you want to get into, but it's a nasty story. But yeah, they did a lot of things to those.
Okay.
Those
and then if you go through Menominee now, you can't even picture that almost with the people there and stuff. But I mean, that's what it was. It was, up north in the logging camps and the iron mines and all that was just like the Wild West back in the day. It was rough country. Absolutely. And then, so I know I'm going to talk about my sister-in-law here, because they live up there and she works at a studio in Marinette called the Prickly Pear. And I'm going to call it out. It's okay. I got permission. The Prickly Pear Studio. And she was talking to me about the hauntings that she has going on in her studio. There's
about that, but we did not get a chance to get a hold of that place, and we didn't get in there. We heard a lot of stories of different locations, and some of them said that we could come in, and then when we tried to set a date, we just got radio silence. So
sure,
if anybody listening that has connections, we need to work up there and add to our Spirits of Menominee series.
She's telling me that there's an entity there that they hear, like they'll be down in the basement and they'll hear him walking the footsteps, and he opens the door a lot, turns the water on. And it was funny because she said at one point she was frustrated with him and told him to go away, and he did. And it was silent for like a week or so, she said, but then she felt bad because she was like, he's not really doing it. This is my sister-in-law. It's how she is. She's felt bad for yelling at a ghost. And so she said, listen, if you want to come back, that's fine. Just stop being so annoying. And then the next day they heard the footsteps again. So, I mean, yeah, right. And this, like, if you knew my sister-in-law, she is like the most down-to-earth person. She's not like a storyteller. I mean, that's not what she does. She's just a mom and a worker and a great lady. And just to hear her tell the stories was just like, wow, just like Grizzly just did. It's amazing. What are some of the highlights of your experience investigating the paranormal up, not just Marinette, Menominee, but anywhere up there in the Midwest? What's some of the creepiest, like stuff that you got? Give us those stories that everybody has that they don't like to talk about because it gives you the shivers. I know you got them.
I can tell you my scariest, well, not scariest, my most intense paranormal experience. I know that's like what everyone wants to hear. So I used to own a haunted house attraction, and the haunted house is literally in a haunted building when I owned it. And so the first year that we were setting everything up, we had skylights in the ceiling of the building. And so we couldn't do any of the scenic lighting during the day because, all summer it's, light out till 9:00 at night. So I ended up going out there in the middle of the night one night to do scenic lighting in what was a swamp scene. And the swamp came from a completely dark room over here and then came out past a waterfall, which was surrounded by like 2x2 styrofoam dock floats. And on top of that was all these like ferns and flowers and stuff stabbed in to make it look like a swamp. And then behind that was this big water fixture, and then a waterfall, and then pallets behind that. So I had come in from the far end, which would have been a castle at the time. And I walked in, I'm looking across the pond, the water, and there is a 6-foot fake tree over there, among other ones, but this one in particular. And the walls of the haunt are 8 feet tall. There's no air movement in this entire building. During the summer, it was squelching hot in there, just drenched in sweat. So there's no air movement in this place. But one of the branches on this tree is just lightly bobbing up and down. And I'm thinking that is really weird. I've seen at this point in there, I've seen shadow figures, I've heard voices, I've seen things like peek out from, behind a wall towards us and all this stuff. So I know that I've heard footsteps and, everything that you can name is happening in this building. And so I'm looking at this branch going, why is that moving? So I walked over to it. I was about 5-6 feet away at the time. And I walked over to it. So I'm basically on the other side of those styrofoam blocks from it. And the whole tree just starts violently shaking. And I took a step back. I had the only light at all is a little clip light on my hat. And I looked behind the tree where this pallet, like an upright pallet, is behind it. There's nothing else behind it. And as soon as I step back, the whole tree lifts up and falls across where I had just been standing. So this tree has like a plaster base. If you try and pull it over, it's like one of those old Weebles. It wobbles and comes back to standing. It takes a lot of effort to knock one of these things over. And besides that, it came up over this 2 foot by 2 foot styrofoam block that's sitting in front of it. And we had security cameras in there. I caught my reaction, but not the tree, because all the security cameras are there to like watch, the people going through the haunt, not the props and stuff. So you can see my light react to it, but you can't see actually whatever happened there. But on that note, there's nobody comes in or out of that building. We checked the whole tape, watched it. There's nothing there. And so I ended up, I'm like, you know what? I wasn't necessarily like scared, but I'm like, whatever this is doesn't want me out here right now. So I'm going to take the high road. I turned off all the stuff that I was working on. I packed up and I was out of there. So, but that's the most insane paranormal experience that I've had. Wow.
So you literally had a tree thrown at you.
Yes. Yep.
And it wasn't a Bigfoot.
No, yeah, exactly.
Man.
Yep.
Maybe you should have had that swamp thing filled with holy water instead of just regular water.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yep.
Man. All right. Well, go ahead.
There's so many experiences out there. I mean, like we did a whole episode. If you want to see that, you can see the tree, the swamp, you can see all that, because this all happened before we were even doing caps. But my mom and Derek, who are on the team with us, both worked at the haunted house. So when we had experiences, we were still already into the paranormal at this time. So we started filming it and doing investigations there. So on our YouTube channel, our second ever episode, season 1, episode 2, you can see all this. You can hear interviews with the people that work there and see the building and see some evidence and EVPs. We got that from there too, as well.
Nice.
From not that experience, but from that building. And so it's really cool. You can check it out, Wisconsin Caps on YouTube.
And that's a perfect segue into the next, which is, what brought you into all this, man? What got you started into the weird and wild world that we've all kind of reside in now? Past experiences or just curiosity, or what got you into all this?
Yeah, I don't really know. I mean, I've always been interested in the weird and stuff. I think, I've been asked this a lot, and reflecting back on it, I think it started with Ghostbusters.
Nice.
Saw Ghostbusters, and I got really into the weird and the paranormal and stuff. I had a friend in elementary school that was into that kind of stuff, and that kind of got me into it. And way back in elementary school, I was doing research on the chupacabra, because that was the big thing that was out at the time, and everyone was talking about it. And I did a whole research on this thing, and then going up through middle school and high school and stuff, I was into paranormal. I used to go to the graveyards and stuff. I think, well, actually in high school, I don't usually tell this story because I never think of it, but in high school, I was, when you walk into the school, there's a set of stairs that go straight up, and then there's a hallway next to them.
Okay.
And the hallway that goes next to them goes to a set of glass doors. And then on the other side, there's one classroom door and then more hallway, right? So there's doors and one door, and that's it. And one day I remember coming down from upstairs, I turned and I went towards those glass doors, and there was a girl walking towards me. And she looked, there's like, this was during class or something. I was going like to the library or something. And so there was nobody else in the hallways. And this girl stood out to me because she looked like she was more in like period clothing, not like she didn't belong there. And as we got to the glass doors, I opened the door and went through, and she was gone. Now, she could have gone to that door, right, like I said, on the other side of there, but the door was closed. It didn't open. I didn't hear any noise. It just, I honestly think that was probably my first like paranormal experience that I ever had. And it's so long ago, and I wasn't into the stuff as much that I always block it out, but that stands out for me. And the other thing was, I think maybe before that, I was going to meet somebody at a cemetery, and this was at night, and I saw this green fire coming up from the ground underneath a pine tree. And I thought, oh, my friends back there, like, why are they have a green fire going? And I got back there, the fire disappeared, and there was nobody there. So I've later thought that, or been told that could have been like gas escaping from bodies. But I mean, I really have no idea what that was. But it was a green fire.
It's like what is it? Ben in Black, the classic. What y'all saw was swamp gas releasing and reflecting off Uranus. Well, no, there's a phenomenon called St. Elmo's fire, and it does have to do with the releasing of gases, especially from decaying matter, and it can become luminescent. So that is a 100% a real thing that can happen. Is that what you saw? Like you said, who knows? But that is definitely a strange phenomenon that happens. All right, so
I could see it from far away. So
yeah. You brought up chupacabras. You said you studied it back when it first came out, so we're going to get into that one.
Absolutely.
Now, chupacabras is one of my pet peeves in the cryptid world, the Fortean world. And the reason it's one of my biggest pet peeves is because it started off as one thing. And then I don't know when, and I don't know how, but it somehow morphed to be something completely different from what the original thing was. And that really irritates me. Because what people now call a chupacabras is not what was a chupacabras. It wasn't at all, not even close, right? Nowadays, what they call a chupacabras is the mangy koi dog, or they now appropriately call it the blue dog. If you look it up, they call it blue dogs, which I like a whole lot better than chupacabras. And the other thing that irritates me is when people call it a chupacabra and not a chupacabras. In Spanish, the S is indicative not of how many it is, but it's part of the name, right? Because chupacabra literally means a goat sucker, right? Chupa is to suck, and cabra is a goat. And so unless it only ever sucked one goat, then it would be a chupacabra. Because it's accused of attacking multiple animals, therefore it's chupacabras, meaning it's attacked multiple goats. So I want to get that out there. I hate it when people go, oh, it's a chupacabra. No, it's a chupacabras. There's an S on it. But so originally, this was called the first internet cryptid. This was the big one because the internet was blowing up in the early 90s. That's when the big story of chupacabras came out. And originally, this creature was described as very reptilian in nature. Had larger back legs. Some said it hopped kind of like a kangaroo. It had spines down its back. It had large ovoid red eyes. Some reports indicate it may or may not have had some kind of wings. And it was indigenous to Puerto Rico. It was like, this is where the chupacabras is. Now, in my initial research, the idea that there was two thoughts. One was it was a complete fabrication. And Lauren Coleman kind of goes along this round with it because the movie Species, if y'all remember Species when it first came out, some of the descriptions tend to match the aliens in that movie. And so some people think that's what it is. Other people say, no, this was a legitimate thing. But apparently there was some sort of research facility. This might just be complete legend. A research facility on the island that was destroyed in a hurricane, and that something escaped from that research facility. Those are the two prevailing theories, unless you want to count the alien pet. That one is not one I generally go for, the alien pet theory. So going back to the original chupacabras, what did your research show you? What do you think about the original creature?
Yeah, so you're absolutely right. Everything there I agree with. I will stand corrected on the chupacabras, though. I agree with your pet peeves of the blue dogs versus the reptilian and everything now. But yeah, the original, like you said, it goes back to the description of the species animal or the alien from that movie. And see, now here's where I go back a little farther, because I was reading books by John Keel. And John Keel talks about these very, very similar MO of these creatures back in the 1800s over in Europe. And this same type of attacks, livestock, whole flocks of chicken, a couple goats, all with the puncture wounds on the neck, completely drained of blood, uneaten. So now when you take away the name, you do not call this creature anything, even with Bigfoots, skunk apes, all that stuff. Take away the name and look at what's happening, because now you have more of these reports from around the world, which gives more these things actually being a legitimate species or alien race or interdimensional being or whatever they happen to be, but they're not just on Puerto Rico. And again, you're right. That's where they started. Now, when you look at the other claims and stuff, when you go over to the Texas blue dogs and stuff, which now have even been seen up in Mississippi, there was a video that came out probably like 6 months ago now, but there was one filmed on a property in Mississippi that is one of these Texas blue dogs. So that species is, expanding its range as well. But so you have all this stuff, and then you go into the Mexico and you have the similar attacks and stuff like that. But the reason I don't think, as you said, that these blue dogs are the same as what was happening over in Puerto Rico and Mexico and that is because these animals are still alive, the blue dogs.
Right.
And if they're alive, they're eating. And if they're eating, they're consuming meat, probably. Or some sort of protein product like that. And when you're looking at these attacks, none of these animals, for the most part, have any flesh consumed. They were all just killed for sport, for blood, or for something of that nature. They're not a predation, whatever. They weren't predatorized, where something attacked it for its food. And then, like I said, you go back to the 1800s and John Keel's research, and you have these same MO of attacks over in Europe. Now, I did read a series of reports from Puerto Rico recently I think it was this past year, I'll say for the sake of this. And now Puerto Rico is claiming a series of gargoyles that are being seen there, which are these stone creatures that sit back on or these grayish type creatures, I guess we'll say, that sit back on their haunches. They've been seen at the end of people's driveways in their front yard when they go out to get like the mail in. They've been seen like up on roofs of garages and houses. And there's this whole rash of like sightings of these gargoyle creatures. So now, again, we've changed the name, but I have not heard any attacks or again, the predation, the animal mutilations, the killings, or anything like that. So we can't say that this is the same animal, but it's interesting now that you have this other whole rash of creature sightings on the island of Puerto Rico where you had the chupacabra. I did get a chance to talk to Ken Gerhard, who did a lot of research into the chupacabras, the blue dogs, and all that stuff because he's down in Texas. And his comments on this were, nowadays with the modern stuff with the chupacabras and those sightings, is for the people of Puerto Rico and Mexico, and that this name is not a creature, but more of a boogeyman. So if you're in your house and something goes bump in the night, oh, it's chupacabras. That's what it is. It's the goat sucker, And if you hear a strange noise, you see a shadow, that's what it is. It's evolved from just being this creature that it was when it first debuted and came out, and there was these big reports about it, to now just being anything that goes bump in the night. So that's my thoughts.
Right. It's developed into the boogeyman, like you said, right? And it is, and the thing is, I believe that the chupacabra lore with the chupacabras is, like you said, was predated the 1990s. It wasn't something that suddenly all of a sudden appeared. It's just, that's when it hit the mainstream media. That's when it hit the internet, and it blew up and it took off, right? My understanding is the legend of chupacabras, I mean, it was something that went back, but it was, like you said, it was a boogeyman. It was something that happened, kind of like Bigfoot, same thing. It kind of had always been there. People just didn't really talk about it until like the attacks happened, and it was like one major town, not a major town, but the major incidences happened in a one town area. And what really brought it to light was when the sheriff, my understanding is that the sheriff of the town, the local police officer, whatever he was down there, was walking home one night and encountered one of these creatures on the road on the way home. And that was kind of like what kind of legitimized it, being a police officer having this experience. And I think it's fascinating. Growing up where I grew up, I was born and raised in the Amazon rainforest in South America. The idea of a creature like that existing is not that far-fetched to me. It really isn't. Just as a natural creature, not even as anything as paranormal. And again, when you're in the dark and when you're scared or whatever happening, your description is going to be a little off from what the original creature actually is. And I understand how that works. So I've always been very curious as to what was being seen, and secondly, if what was being seen was responsible for the attacks. Right? Because those are other questions, because there wasn't always a connection between the sightings and attacks. And you're right, looking at the MO, I'm really glad you brought that up. That's one of my biggest things in researching is get rid of the name and look at what is being described and look at the details. Right? Because we all get caught up on the names. We get caught up on, the Falk Monster, or, the Whitehall Beast and Minerva Monster and all these things, Momo and the White Thing and all these. Let's take away the colloquialism. Let's take away the name, and let's look at the behaviors, the descriptions, the MOs, like you were saying. And you're right. There's some very interesting attributes to these attacks. The main one being, like you said, there's no predation. There's no predation on it. And a lot of times it's entire flocks or entire herds of animals. So you're talking multitudes of rabbits, multitude of goats, multitude of chickens, or whatever happened to be attacked. Because it's not just goats. They'll attack any kind of livestock, and it's multiple. So either you have one creature attacking multiple, or you have multiple creatures coming in and attacking a flock. But there's no predation on it at all. There's nothing taken. And the hard part, and again, with the draining of the blood, that's also a really hard thing to prove. A really hard thing to prove, because when an animal dies, the blood all settles to the bottom, right? Because there's no pumping anymore. And I do what?
And it gets coagulated.
And it gets coagulated. So when you cut something open,
eat out immediately.
Exactly. And so that's another hard thing to prove and research. And unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of people that were actively investigating during the attacks. And I shudder to think what information was lost that we'll just never know when it comes to the chupacabras, It was definitely one of my favorite ones. I was all into it. I remember there was the one original website for the chupacabras, and like all the information came through there and was filtered through there. And they even claimed, we were the original website for the chupacabras and everything. It's absolutely fascinating. I did not know about the similar attacks in the 1800s. I haven't read anything by John Keel. I've never been able to come across anything, but that is fascinating. How the same MO has been found for hundreds of years in different areas. I think that's awesome. And a big issue I have with a lot of researchers nowadays is they don't research back. They don't go back and look at things like the chupacabras. They don't go back and look at the origins and all that. Everybody wants to look forward and be that next new thing coming out instead of looking at the old stories. And that's what I like to do is look at what has happened. Let's research all this stuff that we already have all this information on and see if we can come up with new things. And chupacabras is one of those things. And not the blue dog. The blue dog, I think itself is kind of cool and kind of mysterious, but is not a cryptid. And why is it not a cryptid? Because it's been identified.
There you go.
When something is identified, it is no longer a cryptid. That is literally the definition of cryptid. You know?
Well, actually, I will argue with you because you have cryptids. Cryptids is hidden. So cryptozoology is the study of hidden animals, which means it does not necessarily mean that they are not identified, because things like the thylacine or the
which is
all animals still can fall under that. Things like the mapinguari or the Mokelea membe that are animals that did exist, that are scientifically proven, but are
correct
either extinct or gone. So they're just animals that we can't find anymore. Or, stuff. I lost my train of thought there. Oh, I'm so bad.
Well, I keep that to me, that's the same category as unidentified because we can't identify them in the wild anymore. Correct. And you're right. It's hidden. If you want to go back to the official, was it Bernard Heuvelmans that came up with it? I think it was, hidden or unknown, that kind of, and you're right. But one of the biggest things is one, like the giant panda, the gorilla, the okapi, the coelacanth, they all used to be cryptids.
Correct.
But once they've been identified and discovered in the platypus, yeah, exactly. Once they've been discovered and described and brought to modern science, then they're no longer cryptids. People think that they like to call cryptozoology a pseudoscience because they don't understand what it really is. It's not a pseudoscience. It's a biological science. It's just using local legends and lore and mythology to track down living creatures. It's the exact same thing. Cryptozoologists, they do the same things a biological scientist does. They just don't have as good as results. I mean, I don't know the best way to put it. They put out, if you're looking for a civet cat that hasn't been seen in 300 years, you're putting out trail cams or putting out bait for them to come through. You're studying the habitat. You're looking for tracks. You're looking for scat. You're looking for all these things. The difference is civet cats are a known creature, right? And Bigfoot is supposedly an unknown creature. And you might be looking for 30 years and you get one clear picture of that civet cat and you can prove that is what it is. And there it is. It's a brand new species. We haven't been that lucky yet when it comes to Bigfoot. We don't have that definitive, clear picture. People say it's not a science. It is 100% a biological science. There's just not very many serious science research going in that direction. That's the difference, in my opinion.
I have a friend that would argue that there is no such thing as cryptozoology because zoology is the study of all animals or all biological entities. And therefore, any animal that is unknown to science, i.e. the cryptids, would still fall under zoology because it has not been proven yet. But if you look at it this way, zoology is the study of animals and biological specimens done by a scientific research organization. Cryptozoology is done by the citizen scientists because you have nobody running around in a lab coat and a degree claiming that they're a cryptozoologist.
Well, the only person that may make an exception to that would be Dr. Mariah.
Yes.
Because, she is a doctor. She's a primatologist and an anthropologist, but, the argument could be made that she's also a cryptozoologist.
Have you ever heard her call herself that, though?
I have not ever heard her call her that.
I've met her on several occasions, and I do not think that word would come out of her mouth.
I don't think so either, which is one of the reasons I have so much respect for her in that aspect, because she is a full-blown scientist, and I'm really glad that she is lending her expertise and her specialty to what we do. I think that's awesome. I think that's great.
Yeah, I've gotten to see her do her presentation, and there's absolutely nothing Bigfoot in it at all. It is
Nope.
all about her travels and the primates and stuff that she has actually rediscovered. And it was fascinating, but it had nothing to do with Bigfoot aside from she was on the show. So, and
Exactly.
she's not a Bigfoot researcher. She's not a cryptozoologist. She's a primatologist, and she'll tell you that. So, yeah.
But which is why they put her on the show. So,
yeah.
Well, man, it was great sitting down and talking with you. We got to do it again. Sounds like there's so much more we can get into, because you dig into stuff like I do, and I really appreciate that. I hope the audience loved it. And I know, guys, I am scheduled to record with you. I believe we had this date set for January 8th. I'll have to look at my calendar. I think that's what we said. And
January
we'll come on.
8th. Yep.
There you go. I don't know how I remembered that, because that was a long time ago. And so we'll do that, and we'll check that out. And if you guys want to do that, we'll post and let you know when that's going to come up. Other than that, man, hey, thanks for coming on. It was a great show and great talking with you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
You know it's a good show when Grizzly doesn't talk.
Nope.
When I'm lagging and the show is lagging, that's when Grizzly will step in and start bringing us back to life a little bit. You know it's a good show when he just hangs back and listens. He loves doing that. He doesn't have to do any of the work.
It's been great. And from coast to coast around the world, we'll catch you on the next show, everybody. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, everybody.